When you give a man a gun, he can rob a bank. But when you give a man a bank, he can rob the world. This is how I think of inflation. Our monetary overlords openly say they want to steal your purchasing power by 2% a year. An inflation tax. But I think they steal a lot more from you than just the 2% each year. Let me show you. Welcome to the Macro Chimp. I hope you are doing well. This is not financial advice, this is for educational purposes only. In order to see how you are getting robbed by inflation, we must first establish what inflation exactly is. Most people think it's rising prices, but that's only the result of inflation. If we take a step back, we can see two drivers for inflation. The first is money supply. This is how many currency units are chasing goods and services. The more in the system, the more these goods and services soak up this currency, and the more we see higher prices. The second driver of inflation is velocity of money. This means how many times a currency unit is changing hands. If, let's say, $1 changes hands 10 times in a week, or $10 changes hands one time in that week, we got the same prices. Okay, we got money supply and velocity of money deciding what our prices are. Now let's take a deeper look at money supply first. There are two monetary systems in the world: the banking system and the Main Street system. These are two separate systems. The currency units in the banking system do not chase goods and services. The money in Main Street does. This is the reason why quantitative easing by central banks does not create inflation necessarily. Let's take a look at this. Quantitative easing is central banks giving bank reserves to the banks. These bank reserves are printed into existence. But this money does not chase goods and services in Main Street. In order to let inflation spill over to Main Street, the banks have to lend it out, for mortgages or business loans, for example. Then the money is in the real economy and prices rise. If velocity of money stays the same, of course. The reason we haven't seen a very high number of inflation is because since the great financial crisis of 2008, banks have all kinds of regulations to have more reserves, so they can't make as much as new loans. If we now take a look at fiscal stimulus, like the stimulus checks we've seen, they do create inflation. The government basically loans the money from the central bank, bypassing the normal banks, and gives it directly to the people in Main Street. This is why the last 10 years we haven't seen extreme inflation, but now with these stimulus packages we will see extreme inflation. Okay, so now we know quantitative easing doesn't really create inflation, but the fiscal stimulus does. And the official number is around 2% inflation. Whoa, but chimp, the prices of everything I buy has been going up much faster than 2% a year. Well, that's true. And the reason why is this. The central banks and governments use this metric for inflation called the CPI, the Consumer Price Index. This is a basket of goods and services. They check what prices are increasingly being paid for this stuff, and the number rolls out. But there is a catch. This goods and services basket is constantly changing. For example, in order to buy a Volkswagen Golf in 1980, you would have to pay, let's say, $10,000. Today, the Volkswagen Golf is $20,000. You would think this would mean a 100% inflation from 1980 till now. Well, this is not how the government calculates it. The government says, yeah, but the 2021 car has airbags, air conditioner, GPS, etc. It's a lot more car. Or let's take a look at steak, for example. The price of a steak was in 1980 maybe $20, and still is $20 today. No inflation, right? Well, the steak itself changed from a high quality to a bottom of the barrel quality steak, or in the basket, it's changed from steak to meat, which can also include chicken. And housing and education, they took out of the equation entirely. Gee, I wonder why. Okay, so Chimp, they clearly lie about these numbers. It's called the CP lie. But what is the real inflation? If we took the way they measured inflation in 1980 and applied it to the last 40 years, it would look like this. The real inflation of goods and services is between 8 and 10%. That is how much your food, healthcare, education, public transport and housing goes up on average each year. Whoa, but Chimp, why would they lie about these numbers? The reason the central banks are brought into existence is to maintain stable prices. If they openly say they cannot do that, there must be something wrong with the system, and faith in the central banks and the currency will disappear. So to avoid that, they will have to lie about these numbers. Also, the government has to pay social security, military retirements, food stamps, and all those things increase with inflation. If the inflation is 10%, but the CPI is 2%, each year they will have to pay less and less. And this helps the government fix their deficit spending. Whoa, but Chimp, why is this monetary system set up this way? Why can't we have real stable prices with no inflation? Well, that is the rabbit hole question. The richest people in the world who have set up this system really like the Cantillon effect. This Cantillon effect describes how people closest to the source of money benefit the most. For example, when these banks create new loans for stock traders at Wall Street, stock prices rise. Stocks who are generally owned by the richest people on earth. Or when they lower interest rates more and more, so mortgages can be bigger with the same monthly payment, increases the amount that is loaned into existence. And this extra money will chase house prices and, of course, real estate that is mostly owned by the rich. Oh, and their banker friends will have their interest charges. This is how the system is rigged against the poor people. This is the most important reason why the wealth gap is widening. It has been widening since 1971, when this system was created. Historically, that wealth gap is the main driver behind social unrest, divided nation, even mental health and suicide are linked to this. And of course, political extremism. But wait, it gets worse. These central bankers also know this system is about to end, and they are preparing a new system. Check out my previous video on this. They want to create a new system with central bank digital currency. This basically means you holding a bank account at the central bank, cutting out the banks in between. This will allow them to create inflation with fiscal stimulus without the need for those banks loaning it out into existence. Effectively, making a Cantillon effect 2.0. They will have the power over who gets the new money first. And something tells me this will greatly benefit the central bankers and their friends. Whoa, Chimp, that is quite a revelation. Yes, it is. Now let's see how we can escape this nightmare. Okay, first of all, do not use their dead money. Stop using it as much as you can. Save in precious metals and use crypto for day-to-day life transactions. Escape the system, what makes the world such a dark and divided place. Let's do this together. And on that note, I would like to end the video. I thank you all for watching. Stay tuned for a future episode where I will dive deeper into the crypto space and how it can work for you. Thanks again, Macro Chimp out.